Dee?
That is exactly what Childbirth Connection is doing right now. And it's not that they'd be overseeing it, but they're working with the National Quality Forum, which sets quality standards. And they brought a huge group of people together. It was in D.C. within the last year, I think it was January, February, a national symposium. And what they've convinced them for the first time is to look at perinatal indicators of quality. And C-sections and VBACs got on the list, but you have to do an awful lot of work to get it to that point. But this brings providers and payers together. And if they come to agreement of monitoring, and again, it goes back to the reimbursement issues, that insurance companies then say, okay. So it's a lot of formative work, and now they're working at a federal level with some congressmen to begin to look at adding quality standards in perinatal care to the expansion of CHIP, the CHIP program, the reauthorization, and with Medicare. That sounds a little odd, but through those agencies, then they can begin to influence policy on Medicaid. We just heard on the way over that Medicaid is growing in states, and that's another way that you can write to AHCA, Agency for Healthcare Administration. They monitor the C-section rates. You can go on their website and see by hospital what the C-section rates are. There's all kinds of, but if over was now close to 50% of the births are paid by Medicaid. So right, Holly Benson, head of Medicaid. They also contract with all the HMOs that take care of pregnant women. So there are other avenues, but I think what was really incredible that Maureen Corey and Carol Sakala did, and they brought on Rima Jobalay, a nurse midwife from Yale, to work with them, is to really understand the policymakers and how they begin to shape and change the system. Because for years, and I've done this too as a childbirth educator, we keep talking to sometimes isolated groups. We talk to childbirth educators, we talk to parents, and that does something, but the system's gotten so perverse and so convoluted, it's hard to get your way through it, that you can't even talk at providers because they're in a mire of it too, that they found the right pressure points to begin to make change. They changed, it used to be the Maternity Center Association that opened up one of the first maternity clinics in New York City at the turn of the century. And we just learned that Sotomayor was on the board at one time. But it is now Childbirth Connection. They changed it because the new mission is to begin to inform not just providers and parents, but to change policy and move into a new agenda and really change childbirth in the United States. So check their website out, and I think you'll be hearing more about what we could do as advocates at a certain point. But they're not ready to take on the Capitol until they've done their homework and get the right kind of legislators informed, and they're going about it in a very strategic way. So it's exciting.
Very exciting.
And the set does a good job of outlining all the science in her book, but actually on the other things too, VBAC and epidural and so on. I mean, with epidural, so many people get epidurals now, and I'm sure if I were in labor, I'd like one too, but do people really learn about that? I mean, tremendous number of women end up with fevers with epidural, then their baby ends up with a fever. Baby gets sent to the nursery for a $5,000 infection workup. Almost none of them are infected. And Elise Lieberman up at Harvard is finding that a number of those babies are going on to develop early childhood seizure disorders. And it all tracks back to the high fevers after the epidural, and you don't know whether you're going to be the one with a high fever or not. So, but you ought to know about that ahead of time, so you could, I mean, there are lots of other choices besides epidural. And Judy Rooks out in Oregon is a midwife, and she's trying to get back to pushing, self-administered anesthesia like nitrous oxide, where you can hold a heavy thing in your hand with an anesthesia mask, and we use this all the time. Breathe it in during the height of a contraction. If you breathe in too much, your hand drops away, so it can't hurt you. But you administer it, and it has a tremendous psychological effect. It's like if any of you have ever been, I mean, I have, in the hospital after major surgery, and you can administer your own drip of really good stuff. But you can do it. And it shows that you don't use as much if you do it yourself. It's really an interesting psychological thing.
Plus it teaches you to breathe in and relax during a
Yeah.
contraction.
Other questions or comments or arguments? Okay, great. Well, thank you, and I hope we can remember this little gathering as part of a big movement that changed the world.